Namaste Narasimhaya. Prahlada-ladadayine. Hiranyakashipurvakshaha. Shilantanka nakalaye. Ito Narsimha Parato Narsimha. Yato yato yamitato Narsimha. Yato yamitato Narsimha. Bahe Narsimha, Hirdaye Narsimha. Narasimha Madim Saranam Prapate. Tavakara Kamala Vare Nakam Abhuta Shingam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringa Keshavatita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Avakara Kamala Vare Nakam Abhuta Shingha Kalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringa Keshavatita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Keshavatita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Keshavatita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jayo Narasimha Dev Jayo Narasimha Dev Jayo Narasimha Dev Jayo Narasimha Dev Jayo Prahlad Maharaj Jayo Prahlad Maharaj Jayo Prahlad Maharaj Jayo Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gaur Premanande.
Namo Nama Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Nama Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Nama Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Nama Radha Krishna Seva Pabo Eya Vilashi Radha Krishna Seva Pabo Eya Vilashi Jitomara Sharanaloy Jaravancha Purnahoy Kripa Kori Karotare Vrindavanabasi Kripa Kori Karotare Vrindavanabasi Moraye ya Vilas Vilas Kunjari Avas Nayane Heri Basada Jugala Rupayashi Nayane Heri Basada Jugala Rupayashi E Nivedana Daro Sakira Nugata Koro E Nivedana Daro Sakira Nugata Koro Seva Adhikara Diye Koro Nijadasi Seva Adhikara Diye Koro Nijadasi Dina Krishna dase koi ye namora hoy. Dina Krishna dase koi ye namora hoy. Shri Radha Govinda preme sada ye nabasi. Shri Radha Govinda preme sada ye nabasi. Shri Radha Govinda preme sada ye nabasi. Yani kani chapa Krishna pade pade. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani. Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi. Nitai Gaura Hariba, 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 Nitai Gaura Hariba.
Beloved of Krishna, I bow down before you again. My desire is to bring the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. take shelter of your heavenly precious shield. Bestow mercy upon him to make him a resident of Vrindavan. My desire that you shall always grant me a residence in the precious groves of Shiva down in town. Thus within my vision I shall always behold the beautiful pastime of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of the powerful damsels of Virtue. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maidservant. This very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna pray, may I always bring the love to Shraddha and Govinda. Chaitanya Shastakam ki jai. Cheto darpana marganam bhava mahadavasni nirvapanam shriya kairavatantrika vitaranam vidyavatu divanam anandam buddhivardhanam pratipadam punarmita sadhanam sarvatma snapanam param vijayate Shri Krishna sankirtanam Nam Namakali Bhudani Sarva Shakti Tatrapita Niyamita Smaranena Kalaha Vedadishi Tava Kripa Bhagavam Mamati Durudavami Disham Nihajana Nurakaha Trinadapi Sunichena Taroraki Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtanya Sada Hariti Na dhanam na dhanam na sundarim kavitam va jagati sakamaye mama jammani jamanishvare bhavata bhaktir haitati gauri ayinanda dhanutya tingaram patitam mam vishame bhavam buddha kripaya tava pada pankata sadhuri satesham chintaya nayanam jaladashru taraya bhavanam kritada rudaya gira Kulakhanchtam Vapurkada Tavanama Gahane Bhavishati Yukaitam Nimishena Chatusha Pravisha Itam Shunna Itam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahena Me Ashri Shava Padratam Pinnastumam Adarpanam Marpatam Karotuva Yatha Tathava Vitathatu Lampato Matprana Natha Pusaeva Naparaha Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Shastakam ki jai. Glory to Shri Krishna Sankirtan, which can be part of all the just achievements for years and came to prior conditional knowledge. Because humanity large, because great dimension, it is life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases ocean transcendental bliss and enables us to fully disconnect for which we are always anxious. Oh my Lord. But I'm so important that I have no attachment for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the star of the street. One should be more taller than the tree, devoid of all sense of falsity, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to diminish the world, nor do I desire peaceful women, nor do I want any noble follow. I only want your causes devotional service, birth after birth. O Son of my remember, I'm your eternal service, yet somehow or other I fall into this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up on this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms of the lotus tree. O my Lord, while my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name, when will my voice choke up, and when will tears of my hair, my body stand the end of the situation, as you all know. O Govinda, feeling of separation, and for a moment delight in the land. Tears are flowing from eyes like torrents of rain, and feeling all vacant in the world. make me broken-hearted and not been present before. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worship to all, unconditional. Sri Chaitanya Shikshastra Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in the mental chant holy name that should be avoided, and they are as follows. 1. To blaspheme devotees for dedicated life for the propagation for the name of the Lord. 2. To consider names of demigods Shiva or Brahman people to offend in the name of Vishnu. 3. To disobey the order of spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme Vedic literature or the literature pursuant to Vedic version. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna in imagination. 6. To give some interpretation for the name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on stance of chanting for the name. 8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna one of the auspicious ritualistic activities often Vedas as good activities, karma kanda. 9. To interest gratificated person by the glory for the name. 10. To not have complete faith in chanting for the name, and to maintain a pure attachment even after spending so many instructions on this night. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee claims to Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to achieve desired success. Krishna says. Now let us offer most humble obeisances upon all Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Here is the Gayatri, and this was with our great one, and their full compassion for all conditions before them. Vanta Kalpa Brutista Vipasindhu Kshepata Patidanam Pavanekyo Vaisnavekyo Namo Namaha. Vaishnava Thakur Sarvam Sarvi Vaishnava Industry. Shri Mangala Aarti prayer to start. Om Jnana Timirandasya Anandana Shalakaya Chakshumritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Dhammahyam Dadati Swapadam Tikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Bhadrakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sakajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Haritana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitam Nama Om Shri Padaya Krishna Krishna Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine
Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paskatya Disatane Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Sivasavanavi Devi Daitaya Kipavdaye Krishna Sambandha Vidyana Daine Prabhuve Namaha Madhur Ujjvala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Rash Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namastate Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudhapa Apasiddhanta Dvantaharine Namo Guru Kishoraya Sakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralamba Rasambode Padambujayate Namaha Namo Lodaya Sachitanandanamine Guru Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Guru Virbhava Bhumestvam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhuma Sri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Vanchakalpa Turabhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhebhicha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gurachase Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Saktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Jayatam Sudatur Bhangur Mama Manda Matir Gati Masarva Swapadambu Jo Radha Madanan Mohano Divyadrindaranya Kalpadumadaha Shrimad Ratnagara Simhasanastito Shrimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prastadi Bihi Sevyamana Smarami Shriman Rasa Rasaram Bivam Sivata Tatastita Karsan Venu Radhe Gopi Gopinatak Sriyestunam Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai. Ishwara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Prakarasatma Sukalpa Vriksha Laksha Vrite Susurabir Abhipaliyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasam Brahma Sevyamanam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kranandam Aravinda Dalayataksam Bhavatam Samasitam Buddhasundarangam Kandar Pakoti Kamaniya Vishesa Sobam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kalasadvanamalya Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Tribanga Lalita Niyata Prakasam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kayanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vikrahasya Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purisham Navyovanam Cha Vede Sudurlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Satavatsara Sampragam Yovayo Ratapi Manaso Munipungamanam Sopyasti Yat Prapadasimya Vichintya Tatve Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chayatum Jagadanda Kotim Yas Chakti Rasti Jagadanda Chayayadanta Andanta Rasta Paramanu Chayanta Rastam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Bhava Bhavita Dio Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusa Suktaya Meva Nigama Pratitaistuvanti Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavita Bhista Birya Eva Nijarupa Taya Kalabi Goloka Eva Nivisata Kilatma Bhuto Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Santaksa Deva Hidesu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukalani Menatistam Nana Avatara Makarod Bhuvanesa Kintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pramam Yo Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagadanda Koti Yokoti Svasesu Vasudadi Vibhuti Binam Tad Brahman Niskalamanantam Asesa Bhutam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Maya Hiyasya Jagananda Satani Sute Jaigunya Tad Visay Veda Vitayamanam Sattva Valambi Parasatvam Visuddha Sattvam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Matayamanasriya Praninam Patifalam Smaratam Upetya Lilaya Tena Bhuvanani Jayaya Jasram Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Goloka Namni Nijadamni Tale Chitasya Devi Maheswari Dama Sute 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 Te Prabhavani Jaya Vitascha Yena Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shististate Pralaya Sadhava Sakti Reka Jayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vibharti Durga Ichana Rupam Abhyasya Chatesta Tesa Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shiram Yata Dadi Vikara Visesa Yoga Sanjaya Tena Itata Pritakasti Hetu Yasam Bhutama Pitata Samapaitikaya Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Departure Devi Dasantanam Abhyapetya Dipayate Vivitete Samanu Dharma Yastadrike Hicha Vishnutaya Vibhati Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Karna Narnuva Jale Bhajatisma Yoga Nidram Anantas Jaganandas Ramakupa Adhara Saktim Avalambya Param Swamurtim Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasyaika Nisvasita Kalamata Vilambya Jivanti Loma Vilaja Jagananda Nata Vishnu Mahansa Yasya Kalaviseso Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Basmanya Tasma Sakalesuni Jesu Teja Swiyam Kiyat Prakatayata Pritat Pratatra Brahmaya Esa Jagadanda Vidanu Karta Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Pada Pala Yugam Vinidaya Kumbha Dwande Pranama Samayesa Ganadi Raja Vignan Vinhantum Alabasya Jagatrayasya Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Agnir Mahi Gaganamambu Maruti Sascha Kala Statatma Manasiti Jagatrayani Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Visanti Yamcha Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yaschak Suresa Savita Sakalagrahanam Raja Samasta Suramurti Asesa Teja Yasya Gaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmo Tapapa Nichayastu Tayastapam Si Brahma Dikita Patakava Tayasta Jiva Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakata Prabhava Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yastindra Gopa Matavendra Mahoswa Karma Bandhanu Rupa Falabhajana Matanoti Karmani Nirdahati Kintu Jabhakti Bhajam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Krodha Kama Sahaja Pranayadivit Pranayadibiti Vatsalya Mohaguru Gaurava Sevya Bhava Sanchintya Tasya Sadrisim Tanamapurete Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpa Taravo Druma Bhumishchintamani Ganama Itoyam Amritam Kata Ganam Natyam Kamanam Apivam Sipriya Saki Chidandam Suti Param Apitada Swadyam Apicha Sayatra Siradi Bhisavadi Sirabi Byasta Sumahanime Sardakyu Vavrajitina Yatri Samaya Bhaje Srita Dvipam Tamaham Iha Golakam Itiyam Vidantas Te Santakshiti Virachara Kati Paye Shri Guru Vastika prayers Kije. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy. Just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it, so the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is an ocean of auspicious qualities, chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he's relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind. Sometimes his hair stands on end. He feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food, analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasada, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my most respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert at assisting the gopis, who at different times made different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavana. I offer my most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of such spiritual master. The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord, because he is the most confidential servant to the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master. At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shrimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, verse number 37. Bhutanam Naba Adinam Yad Yad Bhavya Varavaram Yad Yad Bhavya Varavaram Tesam Para Nusam Sargad Tesam Para Nusam Sargad Yata Sankyam Guna Vidu. Bhutanam, of all the physical elements. Naba, the sky. Adinam, beginning from. Yet, as. Yet, and as. Bhavya, O gentle one, Avara, inferior, Varam, superior, Tesam, all of them, Para, the supreme, Anasam Sargat, last touch, Yata, as many, Sankyam, number, Gunan, qualities, Vidu, you may understand. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. O gentle one, of all the physical elements, beginning from the sky down to the earth, all the inferior and superior qualities are due only to the final touch of the glance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text number 38. Ete deva kala Vishnu kala mayam salingina nanat vat swakriyan isha prochu pranjalayo vibhum. Ete, of all these physical elements, Deva, the controlling demigods, Kala, parts and parcels, Vishnu, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kala, time, Maya, external energy, Amsa, part and parcel, Lingana, so embodied, Nanatvat, because of various, Swakriya, personal duties, Anisha, not being able to perform, Prochu, uttered, Panjalaya, fascinating, Vibhum, unto the Lord. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The controlling deities of all the above-mentioned physical elements are empowered expansions of Lord Vishnu. They are embodied by eternal time under the external energy, and they are his parts and parcels. Because they were entrusted with different functions of universal duties and were unable to perform them, they offered fascinating prayers to the Lord as follows. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The conception of various controlling demigods who inhabit the higher planetary systems for the management of universal affairs is not imaginary, as proposed by persons with a poor fund of knowledge. The demigods are expanded parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, and they are embodied by time, external energy, and partial consciousness of the Supreme. Human beings, animals, birds, etc., are also parts and parcels of the Lord, and have different material bodies, but they are not the controlling deities of the material affairs. They are rather controlled by such demigods. Such control is not superfluous. It is as necessary as the controlling departments in the affairs of a modern state. The demigods should not be despised by the controlled living beings. They are all great devotees of the Lord, entrusted to execute certain functions of universal affairs. One may be angry with Yamaraja for his thankless task of punishing sinful souls, but Yamaraja is one of the authorized devotees of the Lord, and so are all the other demigods. A devotee of the Lord is never controlled by such deputed demigods, who function as assistants of the Lord, but he shows them all respects on account of the responsible positions to which they have been appointed by the Lord. At the same time, a devotee of the Lord does not foolishly mistake them to be the Supreme Lord. Only foolish persons accept the demigods as being on the same level as Vishnu. Actually, they are all appointed as servants of Vishnu. Anyone who places the Lord and the demigods on the same level is called a pasandi, or atheist. The demigods are worshipped by persons who are more or less adherents of the processes of jnana, yoga, and karma. That is, impersonalists, meditators, and fruitive workers. The devotees, however, worship only the Supreme Lord Vishnu. The worship is not for any material benefit, as desired by all the materialists, even up to the salvationists, mystics, and fruitive workers. Devotees worship the Supreme Lord to attain unalloyed devotion to the Lord. The Lord, however, is not worshipped by others who have no program for attaining love of God, which is the essential aim of human life. Persons averse to a loving relationship with God are more or less condemned by their own actions. The Lord is equal to every living entity, just like the flowing Ganges. The Ganges water is meant for the purification of everyone. Yet the trees on the banks of the Ganges have different values. A mango tree on the bank of the Ganges drinks the water, and the nimba tree also drinks the same water, but the fruits of both trees are different. One is celestially sweet, and the other is hellishly bitter. The condemned bitterness of the nimba is due to its own past work, just as the sweetness of the mango is also due to its own karma. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 16:19, Tanaham dvisata kruran samsaresu naradaman chipam yajasram asuban asurvisveva yonisu. The envious, the mischievous, the lowest of mankind, these do I ever put back into the ocean of material existence, into various demoniac species of life. Demigods like Sri Yamaraja and other controllers are there for the unwanted conditional souls who always engage in threatening the tranquility of the kingdom of God. Since all the demigods are confidential devotee servitors of the Lord, they are never to be condemned. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The controlling deities of all the above mentioned, the previous verse says, O gentle one, of all the physical elements beginning from the sky down to the earth, all the inferior and superior qualities are due only to the final touch of the glance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then text 38, the controlling deities of all the above mentioned physical elements are empowered expansions of Lord Vishnu. They are embodied by eternal time under the external energy, and they are his parts and parcels. Because they were entrusted with different functions of universal duties and were unable to perform them, they offered fascinating prayers to the Lord as follows. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So here we have very nice discussion. Prabhupada is explaining, well, first of all, Bhagavatam, or Sukadeva Goswami explains that, no matter what the material nature is doing, and because it's controlled by the demigods and the modes of material nature and time, nothing actually works until the touch of the Lord, or in other words, his glancing upon the different elements that interact with each other. So he is the, you would call it the unseen cause, and the nature is the seen cause. But the efficient cause, the one that actually makes things work, is the glancing of the Lord. Now, this is a subtle thing. It's something that the scientists have tremendous difficulty trying to understand. Therefore, they give up trying to understand. They just say, this is not scientific, therefore we're not going to deal with it. But that's not a proper excuse. That is a cop-out, as they say in English. So, what is the facts? Well, that's what Sukadeva Goswami is explaining. Therefore, he says, all these combinations that are taking place in the gradual evolvement of material creation are due only to the final touch of the glance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna does not physically touch the material nature. He simply glances upon it, and all these miraculous things happen. That's the transcendental power of the Lord. And he acts through his agents, such as his Vishnu incarnations, the Purusha incarnations, Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, Kshirodakshay Vishnu, and then the demigods, beginning with Brahma and Shiva and Varuna and etc., and then the living entities, the jivas, us. So he is acting through all of these, what we would call personified energies of the Lord. Everything is personal, actually, although some things appear to be not personal. Like, for example, the Brahma Jyoti. It's made up of infinite number of spiritual sparks. Some devotee has recently written a whole paper saying that actually they're not individuals. And some devotees believe what he says. But actually that's not true. Prabhupada says that these spiritual sparks also have a form. Just because they're so small and you can't see it doesn't mean they don't have a form. And they have a heart and so forth. So Krishna is bigger than the biggest and he's smaller than the smallest. So obviously when you're talking about him in his universal form, there's one black minister, he said, you can't see the Lord because he's so big, you can't get back far enough to see how big he is. So that's a very cute way of saying it also. He's so big, you can't perceive him. In other words, he's saying you can't get back far enough to see how big he is. In any case, Arjuna was able to see the universal form because Krishna gave him the eyes to see. And he can also give us the eyes to see the form of the spiritual spark, or the jiva, which is 1/10,000th the tip of a hair. And of course, there's no microscope today that could see such a small thing, but Krishna can give the eyes to see things. So therefore, everything depends on Krishna. No one is independent of Krishna. Nothing is independent of Krishna. This is also very difficult for the scientists and philosophers to understand, that someone can have so much power on the microscopic level and on the macroscopic level. Both levels, he is absolutely the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he is the Ishvara, the controller of everything. And his name is Krishna, or Govinda. Okay, so now, in the material world, there are controlling deities, or they're the demigods, and they're controlling the different aspects of the material nature, such as currents of water, such as rain, such as the sun, such as the moon, and so forth. And in order to do that, there's 33 crores of demigods. So that's a huge number. But that's necessary. Like, for example, in Sammamish, they have about, I think, several hundred persons working in the mayor's office to manage this little city, which has approximately 60,000 people. And then Seattle has a lot more people. It runs into the thousands of people to manage the city of Seattle. And let's look at it and what it is. The city of Sammamish is not even a little dot in the universe, and the city of Seattle also is not very significant when you think about the universe. Right? So the the devas are managing the universe. That's why there's 33 crores of devas. It's necessary to manage all the affairs of the universe. But the scientists, they have the example of the number of people it's necessary to manage Seattle, but they can't understand that it requires a huge number of people to manage the universe. It's not happening in a blind way, and matter cannot organize itself. So we see, and ultimately, nothing happens without the glance of Krishna. So there are many unseen things in the universe that are perplexing the scientists. And what do the scientists do? Well, they basically, they are like the fox who was jumping up and down trying to reach some grapes and couldn't reach them. And he said, well, it doesn't matter anyway. They're probably sour, so I don't want them anyway. So it's called the sour grapes excuse, because the scientists can't see or measure something. They say, well, it doesn't matter anyway because, for us it doesn't exist. It's not scientific because we can't measure it. Well, who cares? You can't measure it. That doesn't mean nobody can measure it. That just means you can't measure it. So you're limited in your perception of reality. That's the conclusion they should have. Therefore, they should depend on Shastric evidence. But no, they reject because of sour grapes syndrome. So we have this problem today that people are masquerading as great scientists and philosophers, but who have very limited vision. Therefore, their grip on reality is highly limited. But yet, due to their false egos, they refuse to admit such a thing and take knowledge from the Vedas. Therefore, whatever they do will remain incomplete and also will not be satisfying to the people. So this is an interesting point because one time Prabhupada was giving a lecture, and a young lady asked him a question. It was a very interesting question. She said, Prabhupada, why does Krishna have external energy? Right? So, why did she ask that question? Because, Prabhupada is explaining how, the external energy puts people into illusion, right? And there's Maya in the material energy, and it puts people into a state of illusion. So her point was, that means that maybe there's something wrong with Krishna, that he created this material world that's an external energy. Why didn't he just create the internal energy and let everyone be in ecstatic bliss? Well, Prabhupada gave a very interesting answer to this. And he said, as the girl said, well, if Krishna is pure, then everything about him should be pure. Now, she's using logic here, right? It's a strong position that she's taking, right? Prabhupada, when she said, why does Krishna have external energy? Prabhupada said, why not? First of all, say, why not? What is your objection? And then she came back and said, well, if Krishna is pure, everything about him should be pure. Whoa, okay? Now let's see how Prabhupada answered this question. It's a very, very interesting point. So Prabhupada said, he is pure. He is pure. Suppose you are a very nice girl, very, very nice girl, but because you pass urine and stool, does that mean that you are bad? Whoa. Does that mean it's good because urine is bad and stool may be bad, but because you pass urine and stool, you are not bad? Is it clear? So, in other words, in spite of the fact that in this body we produce urine and stool and other nasty substances, does that mean we're bad? Well, let's think about it a little bit. Prabhupada continues. He says, Krishna has got his external energy. Does that make him bad? You have got stool and urine. Does that make you bad? Say, try to understand it. If somebody asks, oh, you are so nice, girl, nice. Why you are passing stool and urine? Is that any argument? I am just speaking on argument's sake, Prabhupada says. Is that any good argument that because you are very good, we shall not pass stool or urine? Or because you are very good, therefore your urine and stool will also be very good? Is that any argument? So similarly, if Krishna has created this external energy, that is for his satisfaction. That's all. But why should you why should you make this objection, in other words? If we are confident about Krishna's goodness, why should we bother about Krishna's stool and urine? Why not directly accept Krishna? Let Krishna pass any amount of stool and urine. We have nothing to do with that. You cannot say, oh, Krishna is all good, therefore his urine and stool should be good also. I am just trying to understand. His urine is also good. That is a different thing. I mean to say, if this is an argument that because Krishna is good, he should not pass urine and stool, that is no argument. External energy is not affecting Krishna. Of course, the stool and urine are affecting us in many ways, but even though we are passing stool and urine, still we can be a good person. The urine and stool is affecting. There are some worms. They are very much attracted to the stool. You see? They are also creatures of Krishna. Similarly, this material nature, external energy of Krishna, is Krishna's energy. Undoubtedly, it is Krishna's. But that worm class of living entities, they are attracted by it. You see? So we should not be attracted. That should be our position. Because we are not going to be worms of the stool. Krishna, there are many arguments. If you ask a question, why the government has created this criminal department, in other words, jails, right? Is that a valid question? The jail department is criminal department, prison, where citizens are put into jail and given trouble. So if the prisoner says, why the American government has created this prison department, is that a valid question? The American government may create prison departments, but why you are interested there, why you are going there, the real position is because you are a criminal, therefore government has to create such a department. So this material energy is created by Krishna because there are some living entities who are not satisfied by Krishna. Therefore, they want to satisfy their senses independently. All right, then your field of activities is here, the material world, not the spiritual world. Because in the spiritual world, everyone works to please Krishna. So it is not Krishna's desire, it is to fulfill your desire. You want to satisfy your senses independent of Krishna? Okay, well, you go over here, sir or madam. You can try and do that in a place called the material world. Of course, you will fail, but that's to teach you a lesson that this is the wrong thing. Why there should be God? I am God. So that's another thing. People say, well, why should I serve God? I can be God also. Well, people like that, they're shown the door to the material world where they can try and pretend that they're God and control something and use it selfishly for their own self-gratification. But that doesn't make them God, right? They will fail. That's why there's birth, old age, disease, and death. It's all limitations on the living entity that's forced upon the living entity to prove that they are not independent. They're always dependent. So the American government has created this prison department. Is that a valid question? Why did they do it? The American government may create prison departments, but why you are interested there, why you are going there. The real position is because you are a criminal, therefore the government has to create such department. So because there are people who are going to reject Krishna, therefore Krishna has created the material world where they can try and satisfy their desires. Ultimately, they're going to fail, but they can try for a little time and think that they're succeeding. But ultimately, birth, death, old age, and disease are limitations on the living entity that they cannot avoid. That means they're not independent. They're completely dependent. So this material energy is created by Krishna because there are some living entities who are not satisfied by Krishna and who do not want to satisfy Krishna's senses. For them, all right, your field of activities is here, the material world. So it's not Krishna's desire. It is to fulfill their desire to be independent of the Lord. Because in the spiritual world, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But if you cannot tolerate Krishna, even here there are so many people. Why there should be God? I am God. I am God. Are you God? But you have got this mentality that I am God. You cannot qualify yourself. You do not know what is God. What is the meaning of God? You are claiming to be God because you do not want to serve God. That is your mentality. So for that lowest class of men, there is external energy. They will not abide by the law of the state. What's the law of the state? You're part and parcel of Krishna. You're meant to serve Krishna. Say, that's the law. You don't want to serve Krishna? Okay, that would put you in the material world, and you can pretend to be a little Krishna, and be a manipulator and controller of something material or some people, but that will not last for a long time. You are limited by this birth, death, old age, disease. Therefore, that proves that you're not independent. So that should end your folly. No, people are adamant. They're stubborn. They refuse to accept defeat. So they go from one defeat to another. And each defeat gets worse and worse. They'll repeatedly break this rule. What's the rule? The rule is we're part and parcel of Krishna. Therefore, we're meant to serve Krishna. Right? And that's by our constitutional position. If we reject that, then we're put into the material worlds. All right, you go there and do whatever you like. That is not government's intention, that people go to jail and indulge in unrestricted, that people that engage in unrestricted gambling and illicit activities. And then Prabhupada says, this Mr. Bhattacharya, he told me that sometimes some rich man goes there and all his wealth and stake it, and when it's lost, he kills himself. And the gambling managers put him down and throw him out of the casino, basically, right? In other words, he's saying this Bhattacharya gentleman told him about some Indian guy who went to a casino, lost all his money, and insisted on getting it back, and they threw him out on the street. It happens a lot, by the way. It happens a lot. He went crazy and said, I want my money back. I need that money. And they just threw him out. So there is no law for such killing or such homicide or anything. Do whatever you like, you see. So there is a class of men, just like a liquor shop. Liquor shop is licensed by the government. Doesn't mean the government is encouraging that you become drunkard. But government is giving this license because there's a class of men who must drink, and they will violate all the laws. All right, let them have it then, right? And we can make some money off of it. So, similarly, there are two kinds of living entities, Nitya Baddha and Nitya Mukta, eternally conditioned and eternally liberated. Eternally liberated and eternally conditioned, you see. So for the conditioned, they will never agree to abide by God. Therefore, for them, this material world is created, the external energy. All right, you do whatever you like. You do according to your imperfect mind. But still, there is canvassing work. Oh, God sends his son, Jesus, to canvass. Oh, this is not your right engagement. Please come back to home, back to Godhead. Krishna comes personally. God himself comes. He sends his devotees. He comes as a devotee, just as Lord Chaitanya, just to again reclaim. But they are so stubborn, they will not give up this habit. Even in their so-called spiritual cultivation, they are thinking, I am God. I am the mover of the sun. I am the mover of the moon. I am the supreme. I can order the universe. All silly nonsense theories, right? In this way, that is the disease, you see. So as for the diseased person, there is a hospital. There is operation is going on. So many severe things are going on. Similarly, for the criminal, there is prison department. So it is not the government's desire that there should be hospital or prison house. They can save so much money by not having these things. But the people want it. A class of men, third-class men, they want this. They want to be diseased. They want to be criminals. So there must be some department for them, just like Monte Carlo. Wow, Prabhupada mentions this. Out of nowhere, he says Monte Carlo. Well, Monte Carlo is a town in the south of France, right on the Riviera. It's an independent country, but it's only one town. And they have unlimited gambling there. So people go there to throw their money away and engage in illicit sex and intoxication, meat eating, and gambling. And that little municipality, which is a separate country, makes a lot of money off of what? These sinful activities, right? So people go there to enjoy the so-called happiness of losing your money and killing yourself by intoxication, illicit activities, and so forth. How are they killing themselves? Because they're wasting their energy, and they're completely in illusion. They go there to enjoy, just like people go to Las Vegas to enjoy, or Disneyland to enjoy. But actually they're wasting their time, and it's basically expanding or using up their energy that should be used to please Krishna in a useless way to try and please their body and their crooked mind. Okay, so therefore Prabhupada says Monte Carlo. So this is a facility for the living entities for the slight independence which has been given by God to them. That's all. So material energy is there not by Krishna's own will. You want it. Therefore there it is. Is that clear? And the girl said, yes. There will be no more. Is that possible? How many people are coming to become Krishna conscious? You see? So therefore it must remain. In other words, he's saying very few people are coming to be Krishna conscious. So therefore the material energy has to be there. Right? It's for this number of errant people who are adamant and refuse to surrender to Krishna, which is their constitutional position. And they can be happy, and all their problems can go away. But no. They want to struggle in the material world. So then one devotee said, well, Prabhupada, can we ask Krishna to force us to surrender to him due to our conditioning? Prabhupada, yes, you can request him, and he sometimes forces. He puts you in such circumstances that you have no other way than to surrender to Krishna. Yes, that is a special favor of Krishna to the devotee, to the person. That is special favor. Yes, my spiritual master wanted me to preach, but I did not like it. But he forced me. Yes, that is my practical experience. I had no desire to accept the sannyasa order and preach, but my spiritual master wanted it. I am not very much inclined, but he forced me. That is also done. That is a special favor. When he forced me, at that time I thought, what? What is this? What? I am committing some mistake, or what is this? I was puzzled. But a little later, I could understand that it is the greatest favor shown to me. You see? So when Krishna forces somebody to surrender, that is a great favor. But generally, he does not do so. But he does so to a person who is very sincere to Krishna's service, but at the same time, he has got slight desire for material enjoyment. In that case, this Krishna says, this foolish person does not know that material facility will never make him happy, and he is certainly and he is sincerely seeking my favor at the same time. So he is foolish. Therefore, in other words, on one hand, he wants to be Krishna conscious. On the other hand, he still wants to enjoy the material world. In that case, the foolish person does not know that material facility will never make him happy, and he is sincerely seeking my favor. So he is foolish. Therefore, whatever resource or little resource he has got for material enjoyment, break it. Break it. Then he will have no other alternative than to surrender to me. That is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam. Yasyaham anagrinanti harishi taddanai sanai. Taddanam sanai. Krishna says that if I do somebody special favor, then I make him poverty-stricken. I take away all his means of sense enjoyment. You see? That is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam. Right? Yasyaham anigrinami harishita danam sanai. Because here in the material world, everyone is trying to be happy by earning more money, by business, by service, by this way or that way. But in special cases, Krishna makes his business or service unsuccessful. Do you like that? And then everybody laughs. At that time, he has no other alternative than to surrender to Krishna. You see? But sometimes, when we are unsuccessful in our business attempt or earning attempt, we become sorry that, oh, Krishna is so cruel upon me that I could not trust him anymore. But that is his favor, his special favor. You should understand like that. Yes. So this is very interesting. Of course, people get scared when they hear this, that this is Krishna's special mercy. He's going to take everything away from you. So you're forced to surrender. But that's actually a good thing, because the whole purpose of life in the material world is to surrender to Krishna and get out of this entanglement and illusion. But we are adamantly attached to it, so we don't think that there's any other way. So this is a very interesting point, and this brings up the question I've spoken about before, but I want to repeat it again. That is that in the material world, people become convinced to do things that are impossible to achieve. But yet, they're trying the hardest they can to do it. Like, for example, to think that one can be happy by sense gratification. Now, this is the ethos, the theme of this time, that sense gratification is the goal of life, right? And you need money for it, and so forth. But in 522, Bhagavad Gita 522, it says, therefore those who are true yogis or learned transcendentalists are not attracted by sense pleasures. The more one is addicted to material pleasures, the more he is entrapped by material miseries. But this is a law of nature. The more one is attracted by material pleasures, the more he is entrapped by material miseries. And as soon as we have sense gratification, it'll be followed by misery. Now, people will say, no, I don't accept that. If you accept that, then you might have to surrender to Krishna, right? So they say, I don't accept that. I'm the exception. I can have all the sense gratification I want, and it's not going to cause any misery. But that's not true, you see. So therefore, they're trying to do something that's impossible to attain. They'll say, well, no, I did this and I did that, and see, the piece of heaven didn't fall on my head and crush me because I went gambling and I had this relationship with some lady, and I did this and I got all this money and I cheated this one guy and got away with it. It's all going to catch up. It's all going to catch up to that person because it's a law of nature. The more one is addicted to material pleasures, the more he's entrapped by material miseries. And then Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 25th chapter, 13th verse says, as soon as we get some material happiness, there is also material distress. These are laws of nature. See? And then also, this is the law of the material world. And in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.7.24, Jiva is unable to enjoy in the material world. The Lord comes to the material world to eradicate the false sense of enjoyment. So, what is the false sense of enjoyment? Just like someone thinks of like shooting up some cocaine into their vein, they'll be happy. Well, if you shoot cocaine into your veins, the first time you become overwhelmed by some sense of, I wouldn't call it well-being, but some strange sense of a new reality that you never experienced before. But to get that same feeling, you have to continue shooting yourself up with cocaine, right? And eventually, it gets to such a point that just to feel a little, let's say, a little normality. So in other words, once you get addicted to the cocaine, it gets worse and worse. So, therefore, but people will shoot up just to feel a little bit normal. It's not pleasure anymore. It's just to feel a little normal, right? Because their body has gotten used to that cocaine to have a little feeling of normality. So therefore, one goes down until basically they kill themselves. So that's the problem with these drugs. They give you a false sense of happiness, and then, but it deteriorates your life's, let's say, energy, and eventually just to feel a little bit comfortable you have to take it. But that little bit of comfort is not pleasure anymore. It's some kind of palliative to keep you going a little bit more, and eventually you die. Right? You overdose and die. So, another point is that to think that one species takes place by evolution, like Darwin. In other words, of course, Darwin does not say how the first amoeba appeared in this world. People make all kinds of speculative theories about it. But once that's happened, then everything evolves from one species to another. That's another nonsense. It's not a fact. Although they try and prove it in different ways. Like, for example, in 3rd Canto, 5th chapter, 26th verse, Prabhupada writes, Mother Material Nature cannot produce any living entity from her material elements unless and until she is impregnated with living entities by the Lord Himself. That is the mystery of the generation of the living entities. This impregnating process is performed by the first Purusha incarnation, Karanar Navasayi Vishnu or Mahavishnu. Simply by his glance over material nature, the whole matter is accomplished. What's the matter that's accomplished? Living entities come into the material world. It's not that they're produced by material combination or chemical combination or material combination. It's because they're put into the material world by the glancing of the Lord. And in Bhagavad Gita 17.16, 17th chapter, 16th verse, the more we think of a sense enjoyment, the more the mind becomes dissatisfied. In the present age, we unnecessarily engage the mind in so many different ways for sense gratification, and so there is no possibility of the mind becoming satisfied. Okay. So in other words, the whole theory of Darwinism is false, that one species develops into another species. The different living entities are impregnated into the material world by Krishna, and according to their previous karma, they are given a body out of the 8,400,000 different species. Okay, So then another thing that's impossible to achieve, or is false, to think that matter can self-organize itself. Okay, we just discussed that also. And then the next one, to think that scientific advancement of material science can eventually produce a living being. This is another impossible goal that people are trying to achieve, to create alternate living beings through science and material combination. And then another point, think that one can control and exploit material nature. This is completely false. Material nature is Krishna's, as he says, Davi esa gunamayi. It's his gunamayi. It belongs to him. It's under his control. It cannot be controlled by living entities. So, Prabhupada says, in Laws of Nature, page 1, the material energy is duratyaya, impossible to overcome by material means. But yet, they're trying as hard as they can to control nature. Like, for example, there's a severe drought in China. So China is trying to seed clouds to rain. So they shoot some type of a rocket or something into the cloud, and they're hoping that it will rain. So what is a cloud exactly? It is a giant collection of drops of water, but microscopic drops of water. Now, if they're spread out enough, then they become lighter than air. Therefore, they start floating up. In this condensation, you can see it going upwards, and eventually it forms a cloud, which is millions and millions of tiny droplets of water, but they're spread apart so much that they become lighter than air. So they're held up in the sky, and you can have millions, sometimes billions of these drops and these huge, huge clouds, and then the wind moves them, and they can go across the ocean, into the continent, and across the whole continent. And when the drops become bigger because of, again, the action of the wind and the sun, they fall down. They become heavier than the air. Then they start falling down. It's called rain. It's a very mysterious thing that's happening. When you see a cloud, you should be overwhelmed by the engineering of Krishna. You see, they can't move water like that. Millions and millions of pounds of water over a whole continent and spreading this rain. Whenever there's a fire, they'll fill an airplane up full of water, but it's not enough to put the fire out. Right? They would have to do it over and over and over again. And then when there's a drought somewhere, they'll ship water through a truck to help people drink some water. But it's never really enough. And when there's a drought, they might try and divert a river so that it can fertilize the land that's dry. But those are just ad hoc things. What is needed is rain. And rain, you have to have the clouds. And the water is evaporated from the sea by the sun. And then by the action of the wind and the sun, the molecules of water are separated. And they rise up. And they form these clouds. And then by the action of the sun and the action of wind, they conglomerate somewhat, or they become larger droplets, and then it rains. It's a miracle. It's a tremendous engineering feat that no human being can emulate, right? And we depend on it. So the idea that man can control nature is nonsense. It's impossible to control nature. But one can pacify nature. That's a different point. If people give up sinful activities, then the demigods and the Bhumi Devi under the order of Krishna, will then facilitate people, make it easy for them to live by giving them all the bounty of food and jewels and minerals and things like that. You don't even have to dig into the ground. Bhumi will throw it up on the surface of the earth. But, this is all fantasy for the scientists. They don't believe in such things. Therefore, they have to dig deep into the earth to get gold or to get minerals or to get oil. And by doing that, they risk changing the internal balance of the earth. And one time, because of doing things like that, the earth fell into the Garbhodak Ocean. And then the Lord had to appear as Varaha to save the earth and put it back into orbit. So it is possible to unleash the earth by digging deep into the earth's core and to exploit chemicals or minerals and things like that. And eventually the earth could fall back into the Garbhodak Ocean. It is possible. It's already happened once. Okay, so then another point that is impossible is to think that Earth beings can go to other planets with mechanical rockets and live there. It's impossible. They can try, but it's impossible to achieve because, first of all, there are superior planets to the Earth where there's superior living entities. So just like you have to get a visa to come from India to the United States, you would have to get a visa or the permission of the controlling deities of those other planets to go there. So they can try, but it doesn't mean they're going to succeed. And they've been trying. Like they claimed that they went to the moon in the 1960s, right? But they gave up going to the moon. And then they said, well, we'll go to Mars instead of the moon. So this is going to go on ad infinitum. They'll be trying to go to this place or that place, but they will not succeed. Okay. So then another impossibility is to think they are independent. But this was never true and cannot be achieved by any living entity. You cannot be independent. You would have to be free of birth, death, old age, and disease. And that's what they're trying to do, but it's impossible. Right? And then to think that the body is the self. At no time has the body been the self. One can ask, which body you're talking about? So there are a lot of things, there's a longer list of things that are impossible to achieve that people are trying to achieve and using all their energy and time to do that. Now, another interesting point that Prabhupada explains is he says, why do people try and do things like this, things that are actually impossible to achieve? Right? He says, yes, propaganda. That is the cause of India's cultural fall down. These Britishers simply made propaganda that whatever you have got in India, this is all fiction. These shastras are nothing. But now you are learning from us England's work in India. That is real. You are becoming civilized now because we have come to your country and we are giving you real education. Otherwise, you are in the utopia. You are in a fictional world. And all these shastras, throw them out, because that was Lord Macaulay's policy. Lord Macaulay was sent to report how Indians can be governed nicely. So he reported that if you keep the Indians as Indians, you will never be able to govern them because they are superior because of their religion. You make propaganda that they are inferior and they will imitate you, and then you can control them. And this is what they did. So one devotee says, the Indians would never be able to compete with the Britishers' platform. Prabhupada. No, it was under the British rule. From the childhood, they are subjected to the propaganda. From the childhood, the Indian kids are subjected to propaganda. We read one book, a small book, by Mr. Ghose. The subject matter was England's Work in India. Have you ever heard of that book? England's Work in India. Have you ever heard of that book? It used to be compulsory reading in schools in India during the British time. Of course, after independence, they probably got rid of it, but up until then, it was compulsory reading for all Indian kids. And that was a compulsory reading book in the schools. And in that book, it was simply stated that we are, or Indians, are uncivilized. And since the Britishers have come, we are becoming civilized. That was the subject matter of that book. England's Work in India. So everything India was bad. And the Jawahar Halal is the typical example. Everything Indian is bad. Right? That was his philosophy. What does it say? Did you see it?
Yeah, so there's some book, some archives. I'm still trying to find out if there's an excerpt.
What?
There is a book. Some archives has the book.
Yeah, because the Indians stopped it once they had independence, but it was compulsory reading up to independence. England's Work in India. Go ahead. What's it say?
It says, so the British Raj period of direct British rule over the Indian subcontinent from 1858 until the independence of
India.
So this book was basically talking about how the British have helped the Indian subcontinent in terms of the
Culture.
the technology,
Yes.
and the education.
Yeah, it was propaganda. False propaganda. So Prabhupada says, Gandhi was trying to get the Indians back to the village. His philosophy was, these capitalists, they're exploiting these poor men. So all these poor men, they should go back to the village and be satisfied with the village economy, not to come out and work in the factories. Actually, that was a very nice program that Gandhi promoted. But as soon as Gandhi died, or he was killed, the whole program was changed. Industrialization, and attract the poor man and let them live in wretched condition of city life. You want to have wretched condition, you live in the part of Delhi, I forget the name of the neighborhood. They don't even have water. They have to truck the water into that whole gigantic neighborhood. Do you know where that is in Delhi? Huh?
No,
Huh?
I don't remember, but I can figure out.
Yeah, it's a big neighborhood. There's thousands and thousands of people living there. They don't have running water. They have to bring the water in with a truck, right?
No, Connaught Place is a very good place.
Where's that neighborhood where the big mosque is? What's that neighborhood in Delhi?
Lal Killa or Chandni Chowk.
Chandi Chowk. Is it Chandi Chowk?
Chandni Chowk.
Chandni Chowk. Is it Chandni Chowk?
Yeah, it is very narrow. It's all roads, and inside the neighborhood, the shops, market shop, it's very narrow that it's very difficult to walk in.
Right. I think that's the neighborhood. They have to bring the water in by truck. Right. Anyway, it was under the British rule. From the childhood, they are subjected to the propaganda. Okay, that's the book, England's Work in India. But as soon as Gandhi died or he was killed, the whole program was changed. Industrialization. And attract the poor man and let them live in wretched condition of city life. Gandhi's policy was to make them happy by agriculture in the village, produce their own cloth, not in the mill, but with the charka, the spinning wheel. Spinning wheel. They were spinning thread. Simple life and moral life. No drinking of alcohol, tea, smoking. Just Raghupati Raghava Rajaram. This was his program. And Hindu-Muslim unity. But all his programs failed. He died dissatisfied. Devotee, why did they fail? Why was the program failed? Prabhupada. Because his disciple, Gandhi's disciples, they had a different program. They wanted politics like Western countries. They did not want Ram Raja. Just like all the politicians, they do not want anything good for the people. They simply want to make some money for their expenses, that's all. This is the whole policy of the modern diplomats and politicians. They do not know. You go to hell. In other words, in your country, you see so many young men are frustrated. So, because so many generations were subjected to this book and this idea that whatever the Indians had before the British came was bad. And now that the British came, they were living uncivilized, and now they become civilized, right? And what did the British do? They built the biggest train, development in the whole world. You have trains all over India, and it was purposely to centralize the population, get them out of the country into the big cities where they could be exploited by these big factories. And with the false idea that they would make more money than in the village. But in the village, they were all self-sufficient, right? And they were living happily with many generations in the same house and cooperatively working, and they had a very good educational system. Right? So,
apparently, it's like the author of this book is Indian.
Yeah, he's an Indian. Yeah. Well, so was Nehru. He was supposed to be an Indian. But they were completely baffled by the British. So when you're a new convert, you become more loyal than the king. So you're more adamant to convert others to your way of thinking.
So there's actually two authors. There was also a British author. His name was William Wilson Hunter. I think
he's a hunter. Wants to kill Vedic culture.
They recruited the Indian author to make it more.
You see how the British are? They're very clever people. Very, very clever people. Okay. Well, we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? Huh?
It's still available on Amazon.
Oh, yeah?
This book is available on Amazon.
Oh, my God.
Even the government of India's site is posted.
Really?
Culture.gov.in.
They recommend the book.
It's posted in their website.
Wow. Everything Indian is bad. Only the British are good. You see, and people fell for it. They accepted it, unfortunately. Okay, there's a lot more, but we'll stop right there for today. Are there any questions?
So Maharaj, you said when Krishna shows special favor, he makes one poverty-stricken.
Well, he makes who? The devotee who is engaged in devotional service but still has the desire to enjoy the material world. So to bring him completely over to the position of surrendering to Krishna, out of Krishna's mercy, he will take everything away from that devotee, so he's forced to surrender.
So is that special favor shown on pure devotees? May not be pure devotees, but they are almost perfected in their sadhana.
They're good devotees.
Yeah.
Look, Prabhupada's saying, it happened to me, he's saying. I did not want to take sannyas. I did not want to actually go out and be an active preacher. My Guru Maharaj wanted me to do that. So he forced me. Now, how did he force him? Well, his Guru Maharaj had left the world already. But through his god brothers and through dreams, several times Prabhupada dreamed that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was calling him. It's time for you to take sannyas. And he was hesitating. And then his god brothers, or one of his god brothers, convinced him that he should surrender completely and break his relationship off with the family, because his kids had already been grown, they were already married and everything. And he finally decided to do it. Thank God. Otherwise, where would we be? Right? And he actually did it. And in the beginning, he suffered a lot. He was bored by a bull. He was in a hospital all alone without his family. And he was thinking, maybe I should go back to my family. But then he said, no, I'm going to continue. So he had so many troubles, right? Trying to get to the United States, having heart attacks, and diabetes, and no money at all. And some hippie tried to murder him. And then he took a big risk. Let's see what he says here. He got the first temple by giving the last penny he had, $200, as a down payment. And he didn't know how he was going to pay the next rent. But somehow or other, it all worked, And Krishna, because if you have pure desires to serve the Lord, then the Lord will help you. See, let's see what Prabhupada says here. He says, everything depends on the purity of purpose. So if your purpose is pure, then Krishna will help you. If we have pure desires to please the Lord, Krishna will help. And he'll send everything to us so that we can actually achieve our goal to serve the Lord. Let's see where that is. All right, maybe we can discuss that tomorrow. So everything depends on our motive. If our motive is genuinely to please Krishna, and we don't have any other residual desire, then Krishna will do everything to help us. Right? But as long as we're mixed, sometimes Krishna doesn't do it to everybody, but sometimes, because the devotee is a good person, but he still has desires for material sense gratification, he'll take everything away. And he did that to Prabhupada. Right? So that he'll go all the way to become a preacher and spread Krishna consciousness. So we see there's some mysterious things that happen. It doesn't do that to everyone, but he will do that for some people so that they actually can follow the instructions that have been given by the spiritual master. Okay, so we'll stop right there, unless there's some other question.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
So my question is, let's say if you don't have any money and you need to help your family, so how can we pray to Krishna? Because let's say if he already took away all your everything that you have, but now you can't do anything to your family.
Well, look at what happened to Prabhupada. It was after his kids were married, and he was, over 50 years old. He was 59 years old. That's when it happened.
Okay.
He's not going to jeopardize because you have a responsibility to maintain your family, right? But when, see, you should never think, oh, this will go on forever. I have to maintain my family. No. At a certain point, your kids become independent. So now you're just husband and wife together. So then they should leave home and hearth and go on pilgrimages to holy places to lose the attachment to home and hearth, and then to get instruction from saintly people in those pilgrimage places. And eventually, when the wife agrees, the husband takes sannyas, and the wife also becomes a sannyasi, right? Living very renounced. We mentioned that yesterday. Where Prabhupada says the woman also becomes a sannyas in the sense that she's living without desiring any more sense gratification and just completely focusing on Krishna. So these, there are different stages of life, and at different stages there's different duties. So when you're over 50 years old, you have to start to wind down material life and be much more serious, strictly following everything in Krishna consciousness. But you should do that even when you're married and you have a family. But sometimes people get carried away by the forces of nature. So, but at least at one point you have to cut off all of that and just be completely engaged in Krishna consciousness.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
I will.
So, when the young girl asked Prabhupada the question,
Yes.
Prabhupada gave the example of stool and how the stool is separate from the person. So even if the person is a nice person, like you're not judging them by their stool or something. So my question is, but because Krishna is God, so the example that Prabhupada gave was of a regular person, but Krishna is God, so isn't it limiting to say that Krishna's creation is not perfect? Or
Okay. Well, see, the first point is you start with the known to understand the unknown. So he's giving an example. Does the fact that somebody's passing stool and urine make them a bad person? No. So he's establishing that point with something that we know. See, we know that, even the most saintly person passes stool and urine. Does that make them unsaintly? No. So he's giving an example of something that we know to understand something that we don't know. So this girl doesn't know why Krishna created the material world, which is full of illusion, right? The world itself is not illusory, but it's full of illusions like Darwinism, Marxism, Freudianism, all these speculative philosophies, or half-truths. There are truths, there are half-truths, and there's no truths. So some of these philosophies are half-truths. They have something that might be true, but the whole thing is not true. So therefore, they're misleading. So he gives an example of something the girl knows to understand why Krishna created the material world. The material world is basically a prison house for reformation. Just like people are put into prison with the hope that they will be reformed and go back to normal society, right? And if they refuse to be reformed, then they stay in the prison until they want to be reformed. Okay, so then he started explaining other things too, but the main point was there was something that she knew about, to understand something that she doesn't know about, and she wants to know the answer. So because she is passing stool and urine, that doesn't mean she's a bad person. Okay? So and this question has been discussed on highest philosophical levels during the Middle Ages and the Enlightenment. This question came up. Is the creation of God perfect or is it imperfect? And a lot of people went on the side that it's imperfect because there's evil. Therefore, how can God, who is all good, permit evil? So this gets to be another way of coming to the same point, that maybe he's made a mistake, right? And of course, in the Bible it says that he did, that the so-called biblical God destroyed the world, and then he felt sorry that he did it, and so he recreated it again. If you read the Bible, that story is in there. So that sort of adds fuel to the fire that maybe God made a mistake in the way he created this material world. Of course, that's not the Krishna consciousness, but in Christianity, there are a whole bunch of holes in their philosophy. So, no, the material world is created for the living entities who walk away voluntarily from Krishna and engage in activities that are incongruent with living in the spiritual world. So they want to engage in sense gratification for them. We want to engage in sense gratification for ourselves, not to please the senses of Krishna. So you have to come to the material world where you can try and do that. But you're going to fail eventually. And then you keep trying, and every time there's old age, disease, and death. So you're a failure, right? So eventually, by failing so many times, people might come to their senses. Now, why are these things imposed on us? This birth, old age, disease, and death. That's to prove to us that we're not independent, right? So, and that we're doing something wrong. Whenever you're doing something wrong, there's some punishment to rehabilitate that wrong idea. So, birth, death, old age, and disease is a message to us that we're doing something wrong, or we have done something wrong. Now, if you can't figure out what it is, then you have to come to the Shastra to figure it out. The Shastra explains what's wrong. We revolted against Krishna. We want selfishly to please our own senses and not please Krishna's senses. But we're part and parcel of Krishna. That means we're meant to please Krishna. Right? So that there are other places where Prabhupada says that we are meant to give to Krishna, not to take from Krishna. So the Christians are praying, give us this day our daily bread. Krishna's already given the daily bread to everybody. As long as you take the minimum, you will always have what you need to maintain yourself physically. So now, what's next? Well, what's next is not begging Krishna for bread. It's to beg Krishna for service and to offer that service, which means you're giving to Krishna, you're not taking from Krishna. You see? So all these things are explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, but people don't accept it. And what do? They try and do things that are impossible to achieve. And therefore, they're always failing. Birth, death, old age, and disease is a formula for failing in the attempt to sense gratify. Right? But if we just recognize that our senses belong to Krishna, our body belongs to Krishna, our consciousness, our mind, our intelligence, all these things belong to Krishna. It's part and parcel of Krishna. So, therefore, we're meant to please Krishna. If you please Krishna, you will be pleased. If you don't please Krishna, you'll never be pleased. Yeah, there'll be short periods where you think, oh, now I'm succeeding. What Hari Vilas said is not true. What Prabhupada said is not true. I'm succeeding, But then everybody's going to fail. The failure is guaranteed in the material world. So therefore, someone learns by hearing, not actually by experiencing. But if you can't learn by hearing, then you have to learn by experiencing. But still, people experience it. Still, they don't accept. That adamancy, that obstinacy, is unbelievable. So therefore, they have to keep failing. So why should we go there? And why should we be duped by this propaganda? The only way to succeed is IT or AI. You're not going to succeed by being a farmer or being a dairyman or being a plumber or an electrician. You can make much more money if you're in IT. So kids are getting bewildered by this. And so they don't really understand what success is. Success is going back to Godhead in this lifetime. That's success. It's not working for Microsoft or Amazon. They're just exploiting you. You're just making the owners of the business and the shareholders richer. That's all. Yeah, you're making some money, but you're working like a donkey to make that money. You're just feeding their false ego. And by the way, the more money they make, the less money you will make, because that money somebody's taking the money. So you see that in the casino. When you lose in the casino, you see all your chips going to the casino, right? So one person is gaining, another person is losing. The same thing as stock market. When the stock market is going down, somebody is going up. It's the people who bet against the stock market going up. They're the ones that are getting the money that you're losing, because you're in a position that the stock market is going to go up, and they're in a position that it's going to go down. So when it goes down, they make the money. All your money goes to them. So it's the same thing, whether it's in the casino or the stock market. You see, so that's why the richer Amazon gets, the more homeless people there are. Why is that? The richer the people are in Hollywood, and in Los Angeles, the more homeless people there are. You see, so because they're sucking out the money from you, or the more the United States government borrows money, the poorer people become. There's less money available for the people. Okay. So the people don't understand the economy and how it functions. And because of that, they end up working really hard and making less and less over time, because it's being sucked away by the capitalists. Okay. So how is it possible? Somebody has, Jeff Bezos, he's got $300 million. $1 billion, $300 billion. You know how much money that is? You can't even spend that money. You don't live long enough to spend. You can try every day. Still, you would still have money left, right? So he has sucked away a lot of money from society, right? And he can't even spend it all, right? So this is what's causing trouble. This is what causes revolutions. This is what causes wars. This type of aggrandizement by a few people and exploiting a whole bunch of people to do it. So if you're working and you're being paid $180,000 a year, the work you're doing has to make at least $300,000 a year for the company, right? At least that much. Otherwise, they'll fire you. See, they have to exploit your work to not only make the amount that you're earning, but more than that, because they have to make a profit. See? So, and how do they do that? They do it by dominating people. So one tactic to have is mandatory layoff of 6 or 10% of the workforce every year to scare the heck out of the others that are working. These are all planned strategies. See? And it's mean, but that's what they do to keep people, working really hard. They have to convince people to work really hard. Now, on the other hand, for the people that are not high achievers, they give them free money so they don't revolt. That's what they're doing now, right? They get free money so they don't revolt and topple the whole system. So on one hand, they're exploiting. On the other hand, they're giving free handouts, so people become lazy and let's say, non-revolutionaries. So it's always a balancing game to keep a false economy going. And then they have another game. It's called deficit spending. You can spend more money than you have and buy things that you want, as long as you can pay the interest on the money that you've borrowed. That's what the government does. That's what people do with credit cards and credit. You know. And then you see these companies, they're always sending, even though you might have gone bankrupt 5 times, they still send you a letter saying you can get a credit card. Yeah. Yeah. And then people figure out the game, so then they'll get 10 credit cards and they'll pay the other 9 credit cards with the 10th credit card, right? Until they go bankrupt. And then they declare bankruptcy, and it's all wiped out, and then they start all over again. And then after 1 year, the companies will send them a letter saying you can get a credit card. After they've gone bankrupt 5 or 6 times, right? So it's all cheating. The whole system is cheating, and it's because of propaganda. You have to have the latest iPhone. You have to have the latest Tesla. You have to have the latest this and the latest that. And people get bewildered by it. So that's the truth. Haribol. So you understand, the creation of Krishna is not bad. It's not evil. There are certain things he creates because people want it, you know. But it's impossible to have it sustained. Therefore, whatever they want, they'll have something for some time, then they'll lose it all. And then they start all over again in a different body, but no guarantee what that body is. So you end up in an animal body, you have to wait sometimes millions of years to come back to the human body where you have another chance. Yeah. Haribol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So someone says, I don't want to be a farmer. I don't want to be a dairyman, I don't want to be a plumber or electrician. Okay, fine. But you're going to be exploited. You might think you're not, but you will be definitely exploited, and you won't do anything to go back to Godhead. You'll just be running around making money all the time and spending it. So that doesn't solve the problem of birth, death, old age, and disease. Hare Krishna. So there's prayas and shreyas. There's short-term gain and long-term gain. So devotees, they go for the long-term gain. And the karmis, they go for the short-term gain. Right?
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Vandamui Savadhana Mate Jahara Prasadhe Bhai E Bhava Tori Aja कृष्ण प्राप्ति हो जहाँ होते गुरुमुख पद्मा वाक्या चिते ते कोरिया क्या अरना कोरी हो माने आशा श्री गुरु चराने रति ऐसे उतामा गति जय प्रसादे पूरे सर्वा आशा जय प्रसादे पूरे सर्वा आशा चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेमा भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जते प्रेमा भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जते वेद गाय जहरा चरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनारा बंधु लोकनाथ लोके राजीवाना हा हा प्रभु कोरो दया देहो मोरे पादा जया हा हा प्रभु कोरो दया देहो मोरे पादा जया ए भेजा सुशुक्ति भुवाना जय प्रभुपाद पतिता पावाना जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भू भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Vedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava ki jai, Namacharya Haridas Thakur ki jai, Prem Chikaho Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai, Shri Tulsi Devi Maharani ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Ganga Maya ki jai, Yamuna Maya ki jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai, the entire Gaura Premanandi, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Bhavani ki jai, Nama Om Vishnu. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Jai. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotion. I bow down to the lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By His grace, we can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my conscience purified by the words emanating from His lotus.
Attachment to His lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From Him, ecstatic prema emanates. By Him, ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of His character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord is master of the devotees. O Lokanath Goswami, O my, give me the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over
We
the
take
three
shelter
worlds.
of lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada, Patita Bhavani ki jai, Gaura Premanandi, Haribol. Nama Om Vishnu Hare Krishna Krishna Hare So this is a very interesting point here. I'll just read it. So it says, the best brains and the best energies are concentrated on evolving and applying Western models and solutions. We seem to know less and less about our own nation. After all, how does a nation die? One way is by physical destruction, as the Europeans who settled in America destroyed the whole civilizations there. Another is that people lose faith in their own way of life, their philosophies, their principles, their thought currents, etc., and the nation is destroyed. That's exactly what the British have done. Right? So how do you turn that around? It also says, the point to note here is that they are responsible not because they kept all the education to themselves, as is generally believed, but because they allowed themselves to be intellectually corrupted by the British, and because they entered into all the professions practiced by other castes. These are the Brahmanas. Before they just did Brahmana work, right? And they lived a very simple life, and they had a vow of poverty, which was not a problem for them. But then, because of British education, the Brahmanas excelled over the other castes. And they started taking jobs that normally the normal people would take, right? So that created this enmity between the Brahmanas and the common people. They also took on government jobs, thus paving the way for competition and hatred among castes in the society. Today they stand discredited in general and are no longer considered to be the examples to be followed. But although the Brahmins became corrupted, it is to the credit of all the other castes that though they too were targeted, they stood firm and thus foiled the designs of the British. But as the poison induced by Macaulay continues to weaken this nation, we hardly even care to know about Indian thinking, Indian problems, and Indian models and solutions to these problems. The best brains and the best energies are concentrated on evolving and applying Western models and solutions. That's the system. That's the facts today, right? The best minds of Indian young men and women are concentrated on evolving and applying Western models and solutions. We seem to know less and less about our own nation or our own culture. After all, how does a nation die? One way is by physical destruction, as the Europeans who settled in America destroyed the whole civilizations of the American Indians there. Another is that people lose faith in their own way of life, their philosophies, their principles, their thought currents, etc., and the nation is destroyed. That's exactly what's happening now. Huh?
Subtle way of
Yeah,
destroying nation.
exactly. So I saw this when I went to Tirupati. One part of Tirupati is the home and the cultural display of Ananta Alvar. He was the man who was married, his wife was pregnant, and Ramanujacharya told him, walk to Srirangam, walk to Tirupati from Srirangam, which is hundreds of miles, right? This is like 1,000 years ago, and worship the deity, Balaji, on a regular basis, because the deity was only being worshipped maybe twice a month, or once a month. And one brahmana would brave walking up the mountain, which had wild animals in it, and he would worship the deity for a little bit, and then go back down again and not come back again for 1 month. So this Ananta Alvar, he goes with his pregnant wife walking from Srirangam to Tirupati, walks up the mountain when there was, it was just a jungle with wild animals. And he just takes an iron bar with him, and he uses that to dig a hole in the ground on the top of the mountain so that he can catch water, because you need water to worship the deity, right? And then he started worshiping the deity and growing some vegetables and different things like that. So he was a pioneer. And so today they have this, the house that he lived in, and they have these depictions of the different things he did with his wife to maintain the worship of the deity and establish Tirupati as a place of pilgrimage. So the man that was doing that, he is a descendant in some way or other of Ananta Alvar, and he was explaining to us all the different photos that they have there of the different things that Ananta Alvar did with his wife. And at one point I asked him, I said, do you have a family? He said, yes, I have, I think he said I had 2 sons and my wife. And I said, well, where are your sons? He said, well, one is in America, another one is in Japan. I said, really? I said, what do they do? Well, they're working in the internet. I said, okay. I said, well, how much do you see them? Well, he said, they come back, every 3-4 years. I see them for 1 month. So I said, well, don't you want to go and see them in America or Japan? He said, no, I never want to leave Balaji. I'm very happy here. I have no interest at all in going to the West. Every day I can show the pilgrims all about Ananta Alvar, and I worship the deity here. So here you see an example of what has happened in India. The sons are not following the tradition. The sons and the daughters, they're getting into IT. And the father refuses to go to the West. He's not interested in it. He doesn't want to leave his service to the deity. So all of a sudden, the culture has changed. And those kids in the foreign countries, they're going to have their families, and the children are going to grow up in the mundane schools. and eventually they'll assimilate. They'll be lost, right? So this is what is happening. In different ways, this whole Western civilization has taken over in these indigenous countries, and they're changing the culture there. So this is a tragedy. Haribol. Previously, the whole world, the whole earth was Krishna conscious. In the time of Yudhisthira, in the time of Lord Rama, the whole world was Krishna conscious. So that's what we should do, make the whole world again Krishna conscious. Haribol.